project is for Global Holdings. It's a new office building, and it's on the site of previous late 80s, early 90s buildings, one of which still is intact at the east end of the kind of plot. They were really inefficient, almost like a terrace of little office buildings, each with their own staircase, each with their own lift. Clearly they weren't reaching the capacity of the site, but also it was a very sort of depressing moment on upper ground. So we've retained the substructure, the foundations, and built a new office building substantially larger on those original foundations, extended footprint to the limit of the site, and made a very simple building really. Steel frame on the lower floors, timber structure at the top, and the old buildings had no outside space, and I suppose they also had entrances onto the upper ground. And so the big move has been to reorientate the building to Burnley Spain Gardens and to the Thames, and to locate it. It's now very definitely a building you can see for a Somerset house, particularly before the leaves come out. It's got a real presence. Of course, it's got the colour yellow.
Yeah, tell me about the colour.
It's one of those sort of accidents.
Okay.
But it comes about, I suppose, as a kind of... So the building is terracotta on the upper floors. It's a very light, creamy ivory, very slightly green colour. And the yellow is very visible at the top, but actually it's fairly discreet, just the window frames. And so when you see the building obliquely, which you generally do, you very rarely stand and look at the building straight on, at least when you're walking along the upper ground. So it's as much about the sort of reflected warmth of the yellow and these kind of tiny little kind of slices of yellow that open up. Because the building itself, well, it has quite different north and south and north elevations. I suppose we started at the south elevation and we made, without sounding too highfalutin, it's an edicule. It's kind of a beam and two columns, and that motif repeats to make a stack, make another stack, make another stack. Each of those edicules frames a fixed picture window, and between each pair of those, in the space between two columns, or colonnettes as it were, is the ventilation, which is yellow aluminium. So the ratio of how much yellow there is to how much glass and terracotta, the yellow is very much in the minority. And it's sort of like an accordion, depending on how you're looking at the building, it opens and closes. In a way, this was quite a sort of shady, grotty place. And now, of course, it's summer all year round. The stairs is essentially a series of bridges. So this ground first flight is unusual in that it's twisting and extended with its sort of half landing or quarter landing. But after that, each flight rests on the one below. And you'll see as we go on. It sort of shares some of the geometries of the staircase, because you see this is a sort of paraboloid space, so it does these quite distorted things. But the real advantage of having the concrete, or at least having this structure, is it allows us to put very simple, small skylights in. It also allows us to reduce the amount of glass significantly and mitigate any issues of overheating. And one of the nice things is you can see lights. And this is a sort of nod to Alvar Aalto and his libraries.
So this building was actually a series of 4 little buildings stacked as offices. Sort of a pseudo-Georgian building built in the 1980s. So this building was actually took over a very strange set of buildings, which had tiny floor plates. So they had 4 lifts, 4 staircases, an enormous amount of plant to do the whole roof, which literally was not lettable. People had knocked it together. And it meant the back of the street it had an arcade which had a rough sleeveless haven around the back of it, so that the occupier had just blacked out the windows so no one could see into the space. We looked at keeping them, but it was a massive brick building, it just wasn't practical. So what we've ended up doing is keeping all the foundations and the frame where it's applicable, and we used the original engineers so we could go down on the original pile cap, so we brought everything back up on the original structure. So we've used as much as we can, but increased the area by about 30%, and created hopefully what is attractive modern space, which is pretty unspecific. So it's open, it's pretty fluid. The building's designed so it can be divided or occupied as a single occupier. And then on the ground floor we've got affordable office. So you've got a complete mixture, a possibility of a complete mixture. And then the daylight and sunlight calculations, we used the jelly mould as always, allowed us to pull in these facades to give you external balconies. So on the top level we've got the east, north and south balconies, which allow the whole building to open. And as we go down the building, we have them overlooking the park. This level we thought, from a design point of view, probably would end up being a boardroom, so the whole facade opens to the park, opens to the river, opens to the south bank, and opens to the southwest. So it's a rather delightful place to work, we think. And then in use, the building's designed so it's actually mixed mode. The plans are slightly too deep to allow us to be fully naturally ventilated. You can see along the sides we've got BMS ventilation system, so the whole thing can actually open itself when it gets too hot. So you can actually use it 90% naturally ventilated. We have cooling, and that cooling actually is to serve meeting rooms as people come in and build separate spaces. But it's quite fascinating because when you open these things, you suddenly can smell the river. You can suddenly hear the noise of the city. And it's something which I don't think a person I've ever really perceived that difference. But if you stand in, I haven't got the key to open it. If you open them, it just opens, and suddenly the smell of the Thames comes in, and the noise of people talking comes in, and you're so much more connected. And I think it really makes you realise how much you are cut off when you're in an air-conditioned building. And it's really, really quite isolating, and you are in a completely different world. And it's I think from the point of view of human beings, it's a really bad thing to keep doing. It's not a good thing.
Tell me about the yellow.
So the yellow isn't, as people often ask, is that our favourite colour? Although it's one of our favourite colours. It actually came from trying to build up what was around here. And if you look around, we've got blue window frames on the OXO, we've got green on the historic buildings, there's red brick. So myself and Simon were playing around trying to find colours. And the yellow actually came after the terracotta. So the terracotta is an ivory, and it's an ivory because it's only single fired, which halves the carbon. So that ivory gives us a white. And the idea of that, as I said, the car park was a bit left over from this huge agglomeration of buildings. So we viewed it more as a light well, so almost like white tiles and a light well. So to bring light back to the street rather than absorb light like most of the red buildings around here do, they're taking light away from everything. So the starting point was really trying to make something which was giving light back. So when you're down in those streets, you're feeling light. And that led us to the yellow. So we tried the blue, we tried the green, we tried red with our terracotta once we decided how we were going to fire it. And the yellow is the one which actually has the same sort of hue as the terracotta and works in the alto way of bringing delight into the grey day. So the sun's gone in, you've still got a bright, happy space, and that goes on inside the building and out.
It's cheery, isn't it?
It's cheery, and that hue, Alto did it on the sanatorium on the basis it gave human beings this uplift, and it seems to work. We thought it would work, and people who've come to the building always comment on that. And it was very much not just to pick a colour because we like that colour. It was very much came from what was around it by a series of quite incremental steps, actually. So it's not picked out of the sky.
Are you proud of the building?
Yes, I think we are very proud of the building. It was Jen, the project architect, did an absolutely sterling job because we lost a very good contractor 3/4 of the way through. So Jen ended up working for the client, so they CM'd it, so it's construction management, with us working as design manager and architect. So we had to finesse all the suppliers. Bear in mind, we took over the building with a crane still through the middle of the building, so we weren't even watertight. And we've driven the building to completion with a good set of consultants and a really supportive client. But I think that makes you very proud of the thing. We've been absolutely instrumental to building this as well as designing it. And as I said, the client's been hugely supportive. So that's a massive thing, to have a client who supports the architecture. Not necessarily understanding from the beginning, but when you get to the end, suddenly becomes more and more excited about the building. And if that can happen, that's when you get a winning building. So yeah, I think we're very proud of it, and people comment on it, which is also very nice. It's colloquially called the Yellow Building for some reason. Not quite sure. That's what it's known as.